Educators in Iowa now are using ChatGPT to try and figure out ways to keep up with all these new laws when it comes to banning books and these new stipulations and rules that they have to put in place. This legislation was signed in May by Governor Kim Reynolds, and this is what it does. It bans teachers from raising issues of sexual orientation and gender identity in class through grade 6 in order the removal of all books depicting sexual acts from school libraries. But religious texts, and you won't be surprised, are exempt from that particular book ban because there's sexual acts in some of those religious books, 100%. And also, previous to this law passing, I guess all kids in Iowa that have made it through school have turned into sexual deviants and perverts, because whatever books it is that they're looking to ban must have already been read by someone, and that's what's going on in the state of Iowa. It doesn't have to make any sense, it just has to be hateful. A little bit more, the law requires that school libraries offer books that are, quote, age appropriate. By the way, that's something I'm sure maybe some people would argue against, but the basis for that and the things that they're looking to cut out always cross over more lines than just what they're trying to say they're protecting. Mason City Community School District removed 19 books from its library collection in order to comply with this state law. So they did it with the help of ChatGPT. And Mason City's assistant superintendent of curriculum here told the Gazette that this is what their issue is and why they have to use ChatGPT. It's simply not feasible to read every book and filter for these new requirements. Frankly, we have more important things to do than spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to protect kids from books. It does sound ridiculous, doesn't it? At the same time, we do have a legal and ethical obligation to comply with the law. Our goal here is really is a defensible process. Also, X-Men discussed that the process administrators use to determine which books need to be removed. This is what they pointed out here. She and fellow administrators first compiled a master list of commonly challenged books. Then they removed all those challenged for reasons other than sexual content. And for those titles within Mason City's library collections, administrators asked ChatGPT the specific language of Iowa's new law, which was this: does said book contain a description or depiction of a sex act? If the answer was yes, the book would be removed from circulation and stored. But ChatGPT produced several different results for Popular Science, who tested that AI program to see exactly how it could work under their questions with the same list of the same books. And they asked, do any of the following books or book series contain explicit or sexual scenes? They asked the ChatGPT this question that came up with. Of those 19 removed titles, ChatGPT told Popular Science that only 4 contained explicit or sexual content. Another 6 supposedly contained mature themes, but not necessarily explicit content. And the remaining 9 were deemed to include primarily mature themes, little to no explicit sexual content. So again, David, the main thing we're seeing here is these laws get put into place. They have this rushed a deadline for these schools, administrators, and superintendents to go through and make sure they follow this law. But in reality, as they passed it, the whole point was to pass it and say, yes, we're protecting children. They don't actually care about how it's done. They don't care which books are taken out. They kind of do, because they make sure that their religious texts stay in there. But they want to make sure that these things happen so quickly so they can make sure they go back to their voters that they've conditioned to be hateful and say, look what we just did. Nothing about actually doing anything.
Yeah, you know what some of these kids are doing now? And I'm just sort of learning, I'm just sort of realizing, because I've used ChatGPT before. I suppose it's possible now to put in ChatGPT or whatever this thing is called and say, what pages are the most sexually explicit scenes in X, Y, and Z books? So that way you can like just flip through. The kids are gonna flip through all the boring stuff and get right to the titillating stuff. Thanks to this ChatGPT thing, they're gonna find the most extreme pages even faster. Thank you, Iowa politicians, you conservative Looney Tunes. You've just made it that much easier for teenagers and kids of all ages to find the graphic stuff. Way to go.
And even with that thought, David, do you think that if kids want to find stuff that they're not going to go searching for it somewhere? You think they have to go to their school library or even their local library like, let me go through the Dewey Decimal System and figure out how to get my hands on this book because I heard that there was a mention of a boob. Come on, bro.
Or they're just gonna enter certain keywords and phrases onto their laptops or their devices, their iPads. And I guarantee, especially some of these younger kids who everyone's so worried about 6 and 7-year-olds being exposed to stuff. If you look at some of the video games the kids are able to watch now, and the people go through and get their heads chopped off and hit with arrows and have arms chopped off and there's blood everywhere. I mean, there's far more graphic stuff to be concerned about through, where your kid is surfing online with some of these video games than anything in some of these books. And it just sort of goes to show, I think that a lot of conservatives seem to be motivated by stupidity. They're stupid, they want their kids to be stupid, so don't let them read.
Yeah, well, the whole idea is, again, more power. You mentioned the things with graphic natures of movies and all that, but like, I literally know where these billboards often pop up in my drives, and the horror movie films and the just still images on these billboards of blood dripping off of it, some disfigured face with teeth that have non-human shape, someone putting a knife into someone else's neck and blood spreading out. All that is perfectly fine as you're driving with your 4-year-old driving down the street. But if there's a mention of a boob, oh my God. In fact, the kid was closer to that than they would ever been to these horror movies. That's how they ate when they were babies. It's one of those things, but we've found a way to just have it only be a sexualized thing, something to be afraid of and detach kids from. But also, when it comes to blood and horror, it's perfectly fine. No one's going to school districts and trying to tell people, yo, we have to find a way to make sure that there's no blood ever mentioned at all in this. Think about some of these kids, what these kids probably discuss and talk about, and actually have seen, again, in this day and age with iPads and everyone's faces, the things that they've talked about and seen is always obscene. There's no approach to that though, because there's no money in that, or there's no winning elections in that.
And I'm fairly certain, Jayar, the kids who are going to be the most addicted to that kind of stuff on their iPads are the ones who are repressing it because their mom or their dad says, oh no, you can't read this, or we have to ban this book, or we have to ban this particular thing. We can't have access to this. Those are the kids who are going to grow up really troubled and are actually going to find themselves even perhaps more attracted to the very stuff that their parents are trying to keep them from.
I remember I think it was in 4th grade. There was a book with some 3 or 4 curse words in it. My parents were like, "Oh, they wanted to review it." And they read the whole book and like, "Oh, okay, there's issues here and here and there." But literally to this day, I have no idea what that book was. I don't remember what it was about. I don't remember what the curse words were. I don't remember any of the other questionable things that they had an issue with, because it was like 35 years ago. It didn't affect me. Just saying. Whatever lessons were being learned were learned.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.